Welcome to the Spool podcast. Unwind with Dr. Nils Roemer, Dean of the Bass School at UT Dallas.
Thank you all for joining us again. I have a very special guest here. But before I introduce our wonderful individual, our mystery attendee, I want to know you as a child, were you like thinking zookeeper, athlete, surgeon, superintendent, or how did that one go?
Yeah, superintendent was definitely not part of my thinking. I think I was like many kids. I was sure that I could be a singer. I was sure I could be an actress. I actually studied ballet for many years, so it's kind of fitting that we're here in this particular venue. And I was always attracted to math and science, though. And so I did think maybe pre-med and medical school would probably be where I would end up. That's what I thought growing up.
But that's already fascinating, because you seem to encompass the things that our school is all about, thinking that division of left brain, right brain really doesn't work with most people these days any longer. And you're a fine example. But you already mentioned indirectly a little bit about your education, but let me just introduce you. You're Stephanie Elizalde, Distinguished Educator and Administrator, and the Superintendent of the Dallas Independent School District. A huge job. How many kids are in your district?
Well, as of last Friday, we had 139,128. That's the first thing I check.
Really precise. and they all enjoyed probably the last 2 snow days.
Oh, I'm sure they enjoyed the last 2 snow days. I'm not sure their parents or guardians did, but because that meant they were at home. But I think they enjoyed the snow. I saw some of our kids on X posting some of their snow women that they had created.
Let's quickly go back to your education. So a Bachelor of Science in Biology from UT San Antonio, then a Master's of Arts in Educational Leadership, again from the Roadrunners, and then you switched gears and you joined the Longhorns for your doctorate in Educational Leadership and Policy from UT Austin. The one that you've been missing out is ours, but at least we got you here now as far as UT Dallas is concerned. But obviously, we are, in many ways live in the same city, and hopefully many of your students are making their way also to think about us as their potential place of the future. And if they haven't, then maybe you and us meeting here today will also help this a little bit. There's quite a bit of talk these days about higher education. We're a little bit in the news about what we're failing, what we should be doing better. But then when they get tired of us, then they kind of direct their attention toward you, right? So what's going on? What is working in the school districts? What is not working in the school districts? The 2 big things, because they're easy for everyone to remember, are always standardized tests, right? Scores, math scores, as well as reading scores. So where are we with the 2 infamous scores?
Well, so first of all, thank you for inviting me. I think this is an opportunity for us to learn more about UT Dallas and have more of our students actively looking into UT Dallas as an opportunity for them. And this allows us to learn more about each other and how we can partner together. So I think it's, I would make one little adjustment. I don't think they ever get tired of reporting on school districts. I wish there was a lull. Sometimes it seems like it's nonstop. First and foremost, we're very, very proud in Dallas ISD of the diversity that we serve, both from a cultural and ethnic background, as well as the level of economic wealth or lack thereof of the students that we serve. It's something we get to do. It's not something we have to do. And then I think we're doing well. We have much work to do academically, but we are moving the needle in the right direction. And I think it's important to remember that as Dallas Independent School District, first and foremost, we are the Statue of Liberty. We take everyone. And so regardless of what challenges they may come with, we always uncover their greatness. And in that process, we we are sometimes going to struggle academically because students are coming to us from all sorts, including international places. As you know, Dallas is a city that
It's a hub,
it is a hub. And so we also have not just what I will say are our community students from neighborhoods, but we also have immigrant refugees that are leaving war-ravaged countries or extreme poverty, and we embrace that we get to serve them. Dallas ISD does not have academic achievement gaps. What we have are opportunity gaps. When our students have the opportunities, when they get exposure to the arts, when they get exposure to sports, to music, to theater, in addition to STEM and other areas, our students flourish. So it's more about us continuing to invest, support, and uncover the talents that our students have.
No, and I think that's also critical again for a university, like trying to figure out the opportunity and talents, right? So there's talent everywhere, but there are also barriers that, sometimes prevent individuals to go forward. Sometimes real social economic barriers, or sometimes also just simply barriers in terms of what is deemed valuable, or what is deemed to be accessible or not. And I think the university does a great job in attracting a great many first-generation students, and we very much are in the business, like you are, of discovering the talent and the opportunities and empowering the students to the best of our abilities once they get here. I mean, the part that I was trying to get at with the scores, which always intrigues me, in particular when it comes to the reading scores, that I think what is partly, in my mind, often missing is that a lot of these kids are multilingual.
Oh, yes.
So you can kind of grade them on one language, but it's, it's in a way as if you're looking at them only from one side and not realizing, well, they're dancing not on one side only, they're dancing on both legs. They have this language and that language as well. How do you feel about how much their multilinguality is recognized also as an ability?
Yeah, I think, standardized tests have limitations. They're important. I can't say they're not important because we all know they are important. I just don't know that we are able to fully demonstrate our students' talents when the assessment is only in one particular language, and we serve students, again, who come, like here at UT Dallas, from lots of different backgrounds. And so in some ways, some of our cultural and language value is not always recognized in a traditional standardized test. But we have been, and the state of Texas also has changed and increased the rigor of the latest state assessment for our public schools. And we believe in increasing those standards. We also think that there should be a certain amount of time that allows us to make those adjustments. And so our students are, in fact, improving. Writing has, when you talk about languages, writing is always a component of that language arts or humanities section that is the most difficult to assess when you come from different languages. And so reading, ultimately our students, we prefer that they actually master academic vocabulary in their native tongue, and then the research is very clear that then acquiring English truly as a second language becomes much more natural and a part of who they are, as opposed to trying to get their brains to think in a different language.
Thinking about my school in particular, arts, humanities, technology, it's a school about creativity. And that's a really hard one to standardize.
That's
like how do you measure creativity? How do you measure the ability to imagine something that's new and different? Yet we all would probably agree on how important and how vital it is. And we probably would agree that maybe a lot of our current emphasis on standardization sometimes has a bit a way of killing the kind of creative spirit while at it. And I think that's maybe the other part to this conversation. But let's back, maybe into something that, I was really curious when I heard that we have an opportunity to meet. So you, in a way, can give us a little glimpse of what's to come, because by the time the students arrive here, they're 18 years old. We largely are dealing now in the populations called Gen Zs, but you have the alphas. So tell us about them. How are they different or not, or what can we or what should we do readying ourselves so that we can assist them to the best of our abilities?
You know, our experience is that alphas seem to have a lot of characteristics of all of the previous generations kind of wrapped into one. The level of sensitivity to other individual needs seems to be an area of focus. Creativity is still there in terms of wanting to try things that haven't been tried before, testing limits.
Great.
So I think all that's going to happen is almost going to be an extension of Gen Z with regard to really pushing limits. I think they're challenging us to be better educators in our schools, and I have absolutely recognized that there's a great sense of community amongst them.
But it's also, just the generation that is absolutely native when it comes to technology, where if we want to explain what a tape is or a record or something like that, we probably would almost have to go into the archaeology, part of the museum to bring it out again. So this is the question, how is then education, this is a really transformative time now, right? When it comes to technology, all of what's available. Initially, we just thought that all of this is just a question of information retrieval, that instead of looking at encyclopedias, we just had this endless book of resources. But we start to understand that all of that technology is not just simply putting information into us, but is also changing in the ways by which we make sense of things, interpreting, AI being at the forefront of all of that. So how does that, book reading and the likes, how does that change maybe what it is that we want the students to learn these days?
Well, I definitely think it's a challenge. We've got together an AI, artificial intelligence task force within our district. We as adults, I think, are the ones that are going to struggle the most, as opposed to our students. They starting with a couple of generations ago, but certainly these alpha, there's no fear of technology. It's more of what can be discovered through the use of technology. So they're constantly trying to test. When I talk about limits, they're always trying to see what they can get. What can AI provide for them? Of course, it creates, and I know there's been a lot of conversations at the university level as well, immediately people go to academic integrity and honesty.
Right.
And, we can't be so worried about what the intent is. Academic dishonesty has been around, unfortunately, for a long time.
Right.
This is not dishonest. Individuals are going to be dishonest, which is a minority of individuals. So I think we have to not stop ourselves from getting into the whole advantages of technology, and specifically AI, because we're afraid that, is that really an honest answer? Because AI is allowing us, it is doing some analysis. It is doing, you can ask it to summarize for you. You can ask it to put things together in different presentations. So our own team in Dallas ISD is utilizing, whether it's something as simple as Copilot or Gemini, ourselves, so that we can see through the eyes of students, what is it that they're experiencing? Because too often we're looking at it simply from our own lens, and in order to meet their needs, we're going to have to put ourselves in their shoes. Yes.
No, that's really very true. But it does, seem also, historically speaking, our educational system, prioritize mastery of knowledge, right? And so this is, you go into school, you learn about a body of subjects, and then you have mastery over these subjects, and you know your dates, you know your events, this, and that becomes ever more so than the educational goal of sorts on the university level. But this kind of mastery of information is also what is becoming more and more challenged if that information is so much more readily available by just a finger click why do we think is our education still supposed to be about that rather than about what to do with all of that? And, I think that's an interesting kind of period where we're in that, educational goals, if you go, I'm a historian by training, so in a way you could say from the 18th century it has been, with the big encyclopedias and things like that, has been about making information available, making it widely available, right? I remember in my family, my parents, in order to provide education, they subscribed to an encyclopedia. And so every 3 months we got another volume. And, at the beginning, I was perfect on A and B, and I had to wait for the next ones to come. That was about empowering, us to be able to look up information and to retrieve it. Absolutely ludicrous right now, right? At this point, at best, they look good on the shelves, if that. So how is that challenging us if education is not any longer about information?
I think this is where some of the transformation in public schools, and certainly I think it's already happening at the university level as well, but partnerships with industry are very important. You mentioned a couple of things that I wrote a couple of words to make sure I made a few points. Let's go back to the memorization of facts, okay? I was going to say there was a period of time when it was valued. I think, unfortunately, there's still parts of our society that value who can recall facts. Somehow we judge a student's ability based on whether they can recall certain things. Yet that solves absolutely zero problems, right? And we are now faced with an ever-changing world, with whether it's challenges within our own community, within our state, within our nation, internationally, conflicts of philosophy. And so it's clear to me that schooling started in the 1800s during a period of time when it was about information and memorization. We have to move away from memorization towards conceptualization, where we actually aren't worried about whether students can give me the right answers, but rather do they know what questions to ask. And it really is us needing to turn this on its head, but that responsibility really rests with us as the educators, and I think we're the ones that have to have the revelation in order for the students to be able to benefit from that. Because when you talked about creativity and are we really fostering creativity, sometimes I tell our team, we seem to have an innate ability to be fire extinguishers. Students walk into our classrooms with a fire in their belly and curiosity, and we have this way of like, let me put that flame out because you're going to sit in rows and you're going to do this and you're going to standardize things. And again, I think it's a reflectiveness that is necessary for us to truly educate our students to become the leaders, the problem solvers of tomorrow. And that's not cliche. It is the reality.
No, but it also requires us really to recognize maybe that our times are changing. It's not any longer that there's this canon of established knowledge that will provide, career opportunities. So these days, I remember, when I went to school, there were still a bunch of schools around that were very convinced that the way forward was all kids need to learn Latin. And these were not religious schools. It was just an idea of a very traditional body of knowledge that needed to be mastered because it was tied to a very stable and timeless educational idea. But if we recognize that what technology is these days is so different and so transformative, then we have to also kind of say, well, what is needed actually in 10 or 20 years' time is maybe a little bit harder to predict than it would have been, let's say, during the 50s or 60s. And therefore, to make it, like you said, more like not, how did this go? The fire extinguisher.
The fire extinguisher.
That's a good one. We'll remember this one. No, that we want the fire, actually. And, I think college is all about that. You want to unleash, really, these students to find their own voices. I mean, this is also, I think, something that was it's really important to our current student generation that they're also here as much to master this and that, but also really to find themselves and their respective role in society. So fire extinguisher no more, maybe, maybe.
Working towards that.
But that's also, I think, you mentioned earlier the diversity of the Dallas ISD, and that's also a big hallmark of our campus and our student body, which, however, means, I think, as a teacher, and you started out as a teacher.
I did start out as a teacher.
That in a way, when you're in a classroom with students from across the globe and various different social, economic, educational backgrounds, there's no way of you knowing exactly what they have in their heads and what they have in their minds, right? It's less predictable these days.
Absolutely, and where two people can see the exact same experience or scenario and feel very different about what they have just read about or what they've experienced based on their own lives, their own thoughts, and I think that's the challenge with when you still have certain standardized tests and metrics within a system like an independent school district. Again, I understand them, but it's truly the opportunities that go beyond that are connected to the academics. And I don't even know that differentiation anymore of, we would think about academics as these, what I'll call hard subjects, but truly academics is learning. And so that can take place in lots of different ways. But ultimately, a real world example for myself, for instance, regardless of how much I was doing in school, it was my mother working an extra job so that I could study ballet, so that my sister could take horse riding lessons. What does that have to do with what I do today? It has everything to do with what I do today. It allowed us an opportunity to connect to some experiences, and that's why I say these are opportunity gaps. And my parents made decisions about what else we were going to do outside of school based on what they saw individuals who had more means than my parents did. So if my mother's boss at work were sending their children to ballet, etc., piano lessons, then that's what my mother and father, that we were exposed to. I was exposed to all of that. Now, piano was not one that stuck, but ballet did, right? My sister, again,
I didn't try the ballet, but I know the piano. But
and so, again, I think it's important,
opportunities.
It's those opportunities allowed my brain to experience both intellectual and physical movements that allow me to see things, I think, from different perspectives.
No, each one of these doesn't necessarily always mean that one turns one's careers into this. I mean, it also lends itself to maybe a lifelong appreciation for ballet. But you mentioned your mother and I think indirectly also your grandparents. I think in one of the write-ups about you, I read that you're third generation educators.
Yes, I came kicking and screaming to education, actually, because so my grandmother, my father's mother, was a second grade teacher, and my father was a junior high school science teacher, and ultimately assistant principal and a principal. My mother was a secretary while I was growing up, and my dad told my sister and I, do whatever you want to do. College was absolutely expected. After third grade, you go to fourth grade. Well, after high school, you went to college. It was just how we were going to pay for it. That wasn't discussed. It was simply this was what was going to happen. And he said, be whatever you want to be, but don't go into education. Well, here I am. My sister also was a teacher. She ended up going to law school later, but we all ended up, going through education.
That's interesting, though. If you obviously, we could talk a great deal about the more challenges that you're facing now on a day-to-day basis. But if you just think about, these generation of educators, are you glad that you're today in education, or are you nostalgic about, how education was maybe, at the age of your parents or grandparents?
I think it's a both and. I think it doesn't have to be an either or. I think there's some components of having an expectation that you could be anything you wanted to be that may be a little bit nostalgic, that I still am drawn towards, that education is the great equalizer, that it is the leveling of the playing field, that it is what differentiates the United States in many ways from other countries. And yet there are also some things that I look at today and recognize that today we truly do take all. And back in the day, no one was checking what a dropout rate was. Right. Back then, we weren't being held accountable for whether students truly were progressing or not. So I think today there are many benefits that were not afforded then, but I think the underpinning of the American educational system still has some, I think, very positive nostalgia for me.
Very well put. Magic wand. I mean, so if you had your way, what would be the things that you ideally would like to see happening that, in lots of ways you would think these would be both beneficial to these individual students, but also probably to us as a society? So 3 wishes.
Well, the first one would be that we would actually judge students from beyond just one standardized metric, and that we would provide them an opportunity beyond just, at this particular grade, here's where you're supposed to be. So I think certainly one that would allow students some of that, I think, is very important. I think my second wish would be that that educators, and I exclude myself from this because I think I happen to be in a position that if I think about growing up, I never thought that the income that I make today would be the income that I was making. But there's only one superintendent in a school district, and the truth is, I teach 0 students. So
do you miss those?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Now, when I do my school visits on Tuesdays and Thursdays,
I'm
always into the classroom, and I always have to do a little mini teach. Yeah. But I think the second wish would be that there would be monetary reward to teachers, to educators in public schools that would be closer to what their value is to society. There is no way we could ever pay our teachers what they're really adding. But since you said I had 3 wishes, my second wish would be that they would be monetarily compensated at least an amount that would make sense. It's very difficult sometimes as I'm watching Sunday NFL wild card football games, and I recognize how much everyone from players to coaches to assistant coaches, their salaries, and then I think about what teachers do, and recognizing that it is because of teachers that every other profession exists. So we should never forget that.
Very true.
And my third and final wish would be that every single student would truly be able to pick their own path. That they would all be prepared, and if college was where they wanted to go, that college would be where they could go. If they wanted to choose a career pathway that would give them the kind of wages that would give them a good quality of life, and wanted to go straight into the career, that would be something they could do. But that they truly had a choice, meaning everyone was prepared for either one of those pathways, and that we would ultimately not hold that the college pathway was the only pathway to gain that kind of, and I should even say a college degree, because I think colleges in many instances sometimes provide us pathways, whether we end up with a degree or not. We could take courses at a college that could benefit us without always being degree seeking. So those would be my 3 wishes.
Thank you. Obviously, they seem actually achievable, right? So looking at the students not just through the lens of one marker of achievement, but in a more holistic way, it's actually something that universities have started doing a little bit more during the pandemic, and we kind of continue to do that thereafter. That we are increasingly looking at them more holistically and not just simply through their standardized tests. Recognition for value, so to speak, is something that a lot of educators probably would agree on, that that we have to recognize actually how important it is what they do for the individuals as well as for our societies. And then last but not least, yeah, I think a lot of the students, though, whether it's college or not, I think they need, actually, it seems to, often the college time to figure out what their pathway is, because they also often come in here with a set of ideas that come sometimes more from their parents, and then once they're here, they're realizing, okay, maybe, and I'm not going to mention any schools in particular, but that maybe their own path is a little bit different. But I think also allowing them to find that. I think, I just, went back and said, well, you're third generation educator. So in lots of ways, even though you were told, do not go into education, there was a clearly marked path, right? Well, for a lot of these kids coming to us, there is none. I mean, they're often first generation students, so it's not that there's this ready-made blue book at home that says, this is how you do it, and this is what you become. So we got to give them time to figure this out and give them opportunity. And I think both school as well as later university is a great place to do that as well. So looking forward to welcoming many more students that come from your school district. Thank you so much for being here today with us.
It was
Stephanie.
truly my pleasure,
Thank
Dean
you.
Roemer. Thank you.